And we're back. Famous last words. Welcome to News 6 Weather at 9:30. I'm meteorologist David Nazario in for meteorologist Jonathan Kegges. Have a fun and interesting show to break down for you tonight. We've got a mixed bag of things going on in Central Florida and across the eastern, I would say, not even just the United States, but eastern North America. I see Sue over in the YouTube chat tuning in from Nova Scotia. We're going to talk about that area tonight as well, because believe it or not, Hurricane Erin few days ago is what has really helped to bring down this anomalous pattern upon much of us over the eastern United States. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday night to join us here in the Digital Weather Center. Hello to those of you tuning in over on the YouTube channel as well as News 6 Plus. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and rock into this. I got some headlines for you. They've changed up since yesterday, I promise you, despite much of the same here in the Sunshine State, or lack thereof, considering we had a lot of rainfall earlier this afternoon. You can see the main headline is a taste of fall. I like to use the little analogy. You ever get to the movie theater, and even if you're right on time, it feels like you're running late, but you still have about 10, maybe 15 minutes of teaser trailers before the actual main show starts? That's kind of where we're at here. Not only for us here in Florida, but for all of our friends all the way up into North and Eastern Canada. We've got a huge plunge of cooler, drier air that was instigated, tugged down by the winds rotating around Hurricane Erin several days back. That's forced us into this pseudo fall-like pattern. We've had some folks up in the northern states, north of Florida, I should say, with their high temperatures topping out in the mid-70s. Massive change. So the taste of fall is here, but it's not going to hang out forever. I hate to say it. And then for us down in the southeast, not only just in the state of Florida, much of us along the Gulf Coast extending into the mid-Atlantic might have a bit of messy weather ahead for Labor Day weekend this weekend. And last but certainly not least, I always want to mention, remember September 10th. September 10th. First of all, I think it's insane that I went to walk through Walmart earlier today and I see Halloween decorations going up. One of my favorite times of the year. I've fall, autumn spooky season leading into the main holidays. Best time of the year. I got to admit, I love tracking hurricanes and whatnot as much as the next aficionado of all things tropics, but spooky season, once we get through Halloween and then Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, best and most warmth, I guess you could say, of the year. Obviously not talking temperature. We are really quickly approaching the peak of the hurricane season, and I've got some new trends I want to talk to you all about tonight in terms of why it is I want us to pay a little more attention as we get past September 1st, especially this weekend and the first 5 to 7 days of the month. First and foremost, though, for us Floridians, we have just one blip out there. It's been hanging out between Lake and Orange County, southwest of Apopka there, due west of Orlando. That's the same thunderstorm that rocked us here in News 6 earlier. I do think a couple of the very close lightning strikes actually did a number on our gate. The gate's struggling right now. I think that thing is cooked. Going to have to run some maintenance on that puppy to get it finally opening and closing properly again. The rest of us, though, Southern Polk, Southern Osceola, trying to creep back into the southern border of Brevard. We've got some lingering showers down there, but you can see it's mainly that light rain, that consistent light rain down there. Now, moving over to the water vapor, I love to zoom in first to show you what's happening and then take you full screen so we can do a little bit of analysis together. So this is what I was talking about. If you look over the eastern portions of North America, we have a massive trough that's dug in over the upper tier United States, much of eastern Canada, Quebec, Ontario, extending towards the Atlantic coastal areas of Canada as well. We've got another brief area of jet stream energy running across the south here. That's what's helping to support the front that's stuck over the southeast, driving all that moisture over us in the southeast, over Florida particularly. And then you can see if you look out west near the Four Corner states, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, that's our next feature, a little bowling ball upper low that's going to move through the pattern over the next day or two and plop itself down into our neighborhood over the next 3 or 4 days, just in time for our Labor Day weekend. But I'll go ahead and get rid of all my excess doodling there. This here is what's driving the colder temps. These troughs act like funnels. they just funnel down all the cool, dry air from up north. So we're actually borrowing air from the Canadian provinces, the northern territories up there, and bringing it as far south as the Florida-Georgia state line. That's how far south this thing is dug in. It's kind of like dug into the trenches back in the World War days. And you'll see that once we get a little further into the brief. I'll show you the setup. Rainfall totals, you can kind of see what the trend has been here. West to east progression over the state of Florida. I want to see what the drought monitor looks like this Thursday. Meteorologist Samara Coquinos has hooked me up with one of the latest graphics to do a comparison, a compare and contrast. I want to show you all Thursday night just how much this westerly onshore flow may have finally diminished the lingering drought conditions that we faced over western Florida since earlier in the spring and then throughout much of the summer. Here's the setup, though, for us over the south. You can see upper level system. That basically just means where the jet stream is. The jet stream of those strong winds highest up in the atmosphere, way above us down at the surface. We don't actually feel it. Sometimes some of those winds will translate down, but in this case, the jet stream aloft, high up, is what's driving that next storm system, and you can see it's also pulling down a lot of excess moisture that's going to keep us wet, keep us soggy all the way through past turning our calendars to September 1st. Well, I'm slurring my words for some reason. But on top of driving the moisture, that's what I had mentioned, is kind of like the conveyor belt, bringing down cooler, drier temps. While we're not feeling them immediately here in Florida, I mean, I will show you some forecasted low temperatures for tonight. The rest of the neighborhood, the rest of the eastern United States, from the Great Plains through to the Atlantic coast, they're underneath below average temperatures. And they're going to be sticking around for at least the next 7 days because we're in this massive pattern flip, this pseudo fall setup. The taste of fall, as I've mentioned, it's not going to go away in the blink of an eye. We're going to be holding steady with this setup at least until middle portions of next week, I would say. Here's a look at our forecast, and I'm so sorry. This is your high temperatures observed today. You can kind of spot where the rain was falling. The Villages topping out at 88, Leesburg at 86, Kissimmee only coming in at 85, Lakeland at 86, a close second to the coolest temperatures out there observed for the day today. These are the ones that we actually came in on. I know that we've been forecasting high temperatures upwards of like the low 90s, but we've been coming in noticeably cooler than that thanks to the increased clouds and showers and storms that have rolled through. Now let's take a trip across Florida. This is going to be your lows for tonight. I'm not too sure why they're showing high temperatures. I'm going to go ahead and skip over these graphics. I'm not sure what happened there. Those are definitely forecasted lows, but this is what I think the headline is. You look up near Gainesville and Ocala, 68 degrees forecasted for your low tonight, 69 in Ocala. The rest of us sitting comfortably in the low 70s, except along the immediate east coast. That's going to be a little bit of what's called water enhancement. You got warm water off the coast, so it's going to bring up those temperatures, make it feel a little more mild out there, as opposed to the rest of us over Central Florida. And you can kind of see that discontinuity, that gradient, the change north to south of where that front is likely positioned. Mid-70s, the further south you go in Central Florida, but then they rapidly drop off as you go from Ocala northern past Gainesville. Now, coming up after this short break, I want to talk you through hour by hour what our rainfall chances look like not only tomorrow and Thursday, but especially through the extended weekend for those of you across the U.S., particularly if you reside in the Southeast, who will be celebrating the longer weekend as we rock into Labor Day and then eventually turn the calendars to September 1st. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Quick little 3-minute break, and then I'll have a look at the tropics as well once we return. All right. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you've replenished your drink, snack, or if you're having dinner this late into the evening, I appreciate you sitting down and tuning in to News 6 Weather at 9:30. Let's get you some rainfall. Let's talk what we have going on over the next day or two. One thing is for certain, as the front that is sitting over us right now continues to fade away, we start to see a rebuilding to the north with that next approaching system I showed you on the satellite. We're going to see a bit of a return to form in town. Overnight, obviously, we're not expecting too much in the rain department. But if you notice, we're not starting Wednesday off on the soggy side. In fact, we stay pretty clear up until about noon. Then if you notice those clouds from Palm Coast down to the Kissimmee area, hugging the shores of Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach, and Melbourne, that's the East Coast sea breeze finally starting to show itself once again. And then as we transition towards the warmest part of the day, you can see that sea breeze beginning to sneak in. And by 5, maybe 6 o'clock, we're going to start to see the atmosphere kind of become a little more aggravated once we start to get a little bit of that collision going on. Not anticipating a fairly robust or pronounced West Coast breeze, because we still have overall westerly flow across the state. So as we saw today, we'll get a little bit of increasing in strength with these individual thunderstorms that try to develop during the afternoon hours, because the east breeze is going to be opposing that prevailing or that dominant westerly flow across the state. I also want to show you the HRRR too, because I thought maybe our in-house clouds and rain radar model was a little out to lunch. Sometimes it can be, but I was pleasantly surprised to show you that one of our other thunderstorm models is singing the same tune. You can see generally westerly flow steering the clouds towards the eastern side of the state. And then as we go through the afternoon hours, pretty much in the exact same spot. HRRR, one of our other thunderstorm models, is showing a little bit more agreement for some stuff north of the Orlando metro area until maybe about this time tomorrow night. We might see some lingering storms and some evening lightning strikes once again for portions of Lake Sumter and Marion County, maybe interior portions of Seminole and Orange County. Polk and Osceola, you should be okay. Now, granted, these models are going to ebb and flow with the very tiny little processes in wind, moisture, where air is coming together in the low levels. They're going to adjust, but right now, where we stand, it looks like a majority of us should be clear tomorrow outside of some isolated stray showers and storms once that sea breeze gets going. Now, taking a look larger scale, this is going to be the European model. We're going to see the progression of that next system coming down. Here it is. By Thursday early morning, you can see it racing across your screen, coming out of the northwest and settling in just in time for Friday and then into Saturday. And especially Sunday, rain chances really start to go up for us here in Florida. Look at that. By 1 o'clock on Monday, the Euro is thinking we are socked in as another area of low pressure tries to develop. Not tropical. Notice it's forming up through here. It's taking advantage of the jet stream that's running directly over top of it, and it's trying to spin up an area of disturbed weather for portions of Alabama and Georgia, and that's just going to continue to throw a slew of rain and thunderstorms into our area. We're going to be examining whether or not this has the chance of throwing some strong thunderstorms, if not severe thunderstorms our way. The verdict is still out on that, but it does look like the potential will be there, since we'll have mixing and things going on helping to disturb the atmosphere from where we are at the surface all the way up. And now, before we hit our next break, I want to talk tropics. Atlantic Basin is quiet right now. You can kind of see that yellow blip on the left-hand side of the screen there. The Eastern Pacific is starting to get a little nudge in the favorability department. And that's why we're starting to see more and more bouts of development in their next round of named storms out there. They're probably going to eat through another 1, 2, if not even 3 more names off of the Eastern Pacific list before the Atlantic can start to get its act together. We do still have Tropical Storm Fernan up there. You can see max sustained winds now down to 40 miles an hour. This thing's kind of on its last leg, although National Hurricane Center is thinking it could try to do a little something as we go through the day tomorrow, extending its lifespan over the uppermost North Atlantic before shooting into the mid-latitude areas up there. It's definitely holding its own, though. It's a fairly resilient system. I'll give it that. Doesn't really do much for us in terms of hurricane season metrics, ACE. Thankfully, this hasn't really impacted anybody unless you just so happen to be flying or cruising in that area. So thankfully, we can tick another named storm off with no harm nor foul there. Now, for water temperatures, I want to take this picture in. There's something very interesting about it. And there's something called the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, the positive AMO. We're starting to see more of that start to take shape. If you look over the tropics, particularly, a lot of the shades of red have now taken over command once again. And we look for the distinct horseshoe shape in our cool versus warm anomalies. And all thanks to Hurricane Erin and maybe a little bit of what Fernand's trying to do up in the North Atlantic, we definitely have that shape starting to take hold. We've diminished some of the warm waters in the subtropics, and we're starting to focus a little more of the warmth down where it matters most through the MDR, right in through there. This is your main development region where those tropical waves will move east to west. The Gulf is still cooking, and the Caribbean has definitely come up as well. And overall, the circulation pattern, the currents that flow through the Atlantic, is also going to take some of the warmth that's bottled up near Europe and put it down into the tropics as well. We're going to watch that as we go over the next 30 some odd days. What's tricky, however, is we have a couple of very weak features high up in the atmosphere, the upper levels. And I'm showing you those upper level winds right now, and I want you to look very closely. You can't really see them too well, but there's one there, and one here. They're called little upper level lows. They're little pockets of cooler air high up in the atmosphere that actually increase the chance that tropical waves that try to develop won't really do very much of anything. These are definitely going to be what we have to pay most attention to, because as we go through September, the entire background atmosphere, just the environment itself, whether it's favorable or not favorable for tropical development, it's going to be there. It's these little nuance features that models tend to struggle with until you're a day or two, maybe 3 or 4 days at most away, that we'll have to continue to pinpoint. But all in all, this just came out from Climate Prediction Center earlier today. You can see for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be watching that twin signal that I've discussed in previous tropical updates if you've tuned in here at News 6, looking at potential for development, at least more than 20% shot in the Bay of Campeche, the Southern Gulf, the Western Caribbean. And then as we get deeper into the month of September, right around the midsections after the infamous September 11th anniversary, Climate Prediction Center's thinking a 40 to 60% shot that we get tropical action out there in that main development region of the deep tropics. And that's that. Let's go ahead and take another break, relax, kind of unwind a little bit. That was a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So if you do have them ready to rock and roll. Drop them in the chat while we're on break, and I'll get right back to you at a moment's notice. But until then, folks, I'll see you in a moment. Okay, and welcome back. Let's get some questions hopefully answered for you lovely viewers at home. If you have anything over on the News 6 YouTube channel, drop them in the comments or in the live discussion right now. Some key takeaways. Tomorrow looking a little drier as that little bit of mid-level drying, kind of the mid-sections of the atmosphere. We have some dry air sinking in to Florida that could drop our rain chances. But, Melissa, to answer your question over on YouTube, it does seem like there's a shot. I think Thursday, however, you might have a greater run at seeing some rainfall in New Smyrna Beach area. And then Kimberly Couch over on YouTube as well says, got lots of info on the MJO and the gyre relationship. And you're very welcome. I did have a sticky note here to remind me to try to crank something else out to kind of get everybody back up to speed on a few of those variables we'll be watching during the second half of the hurricane season. This is like the halftime show. The second half is going to be getting started by September 1st, and especially after September 10th. But all in all, glad to hear that you got some information on the MJO and gyre. Happy to break that down, especially as we get closer in time to those things popping off out in the tropics. And I think that's what Climate Prediction Center is also highlighting with the 2 areas of red that I showed you on their graphic earlier. But yeah, that's kind of about it. Going to be watching very closely to see what happens this weekend with that next frontal system coming down. Some of our models were a little interested in trying to spin something tropical up along the southeast coastline once again, just like we did with Chantal, just like we tried to do with 93L, Invest 93L, just like we saw with Dexter. That's been a very, very rhythmic pattern that we've observed for this hurricane season. I do think as we go through September and October particularly, we're going to have mixed signals across the basin. We could have some frontal stuff if these stronger cold fronts keep coming down the way that they are. The Central American gyre, nearest to Central America, nearest to the Yucatan, the Bay of Campeche of the southwestern Gulf could become a thing, especially mid to latter September, and then especially October. Us Floridians are going to have to watch it. And then naturally, we're going to have those tropical waves slowly but surely after September 10th. Maybe I will budge and say September 15th at the very latest, pending those little nuance factors I'd mentioned, looking at the winds in the upper levels, seeing how those shake out. The last couple tropical waves that were forecast to try to do something a little more than just bring some rain showers to the greater Atlantic and the lesser Antilles out there, they were kind of shredded, cheese grated down because of those upper level lows floating around the pattern underneath our Bermuda Azores high. So lots of little moving parts. Don't come after us if we have a forecast and it suddenly busts at the last second, because these little features computer models tend to struggle with. Unfortunately, that's the problem with trying to forecast the tropics. There's a lot more intricacies that go into it, and we can't exactly fly out over every square inch of the Atlantic to see what's going on. So we're going to make our best guesses, and you can count on your News 6 weather team to get you all the reliable, accurate, and timely tropical weather outlooks that you need to make those decisions when it matters most and to keep your friends, family, and property safe. And as we close out, just want to wish you all a very wonderful rest of your Tuesday night. Once again, thank you so much if you're tuning in tonight, taking some time out of your Tuesday evening to join me here in the Digital Weather Center. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. I'll be at the helm once again for the rest of the week until meteorologist Michelle Morgan takes over in my stead for Friday, because I'll be doing our morning shows on Saturday and Sunday, so kind of have to flip-flop the schedule. Otherwise I may as well pitch a tent in the Digital Weather Center and then throw the suit on for Saturday morning. But adieu until next time, folks. I hope you have a beautiful Tuesday and a great start to your Wednesday. But until next time, this is the Digital Weather Center signing out.